Welcome back to the Bluechip Breakdown, Vols fans. I'm your host, Bull. It's a busy week for our Volunteers. Yesterday, our Lady Vols lost in the NCAA tournament to NC State. It was very embarrassing. I think the Coach Harper panicked. We saw in one of those later timeouts, I think maybe like a minute was left in the game, and she's crying to the referees instead of coaching up her team. And one of the assistants had to come over and tell her, "Hey, we're waiting on you to tell us what to do coming out of this timeout." So her panicking turns into the team panicking, and our best player in Rakia Jackson just didn't really even get touches down that final stretch. So that wasn't a good look, and that's pretty much my final straw with Coach Harper. But our baseball team did win their series over the weekend versus Ole Miss, so they're going to move up from number 8 back up to number 5 nationally. That's a really big deal. And our Lady Vols softball team will be playing up against South Carolina today at 1 p.m. Hopefully they can go out there and get that win, just get the bad taste out of everybody's mouth. And then we all know that the men's basketball team is going to be playing up against Creighton coming up on Friday at about 10 p.m. So a whole lot going on there. And our football team is off of spring practice today, but we will be back tomorrow. And we're going to be going through a scrimmage. So I don't know how much coverage we're going to be able to have on this channel, but we will just, bring as many insider notes as we possibly can to y'all and let y'all know who's looking good, who's not, and, how excited should we continue to be about how deep that team is. But we've also got our pro day coming up tomorrow, probably afternoon. Okay. It's probably going to be after spring practice because usually what happens is you'll have wide receivers that are currently playing. We'll go out, for guys like Joe Milton to run some routes. And today we're going to be covering what we should be expecting from the pro day. We'll kind of go through everybody, what's their draft stock at currently, and what do they need to do in the pro day to increase their draft stock. So please make sure, as always, to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us out tremendously. We're almost up to 5,000 subscribers. So sharing is going to be really, really big because we do want to get up to that 5,000 mark as quickly as possible. Y'all know that we want to grow this channel and spread the love to all volunteer fans across all sports. So that would help us out tremendously. All right, so first and foremost, we're going to take a look at where our players are slotted to be drafted. And this is coming from NFLDraftDatabase.com. I will leave a link in the description below, but be very careful with this website. I don't know if y'all get the same thing, but whenever I got on there's a whole lot of Georgia ads. So there's no telling if it's spyware, ransomware, any of that type of stuff. So just kind of go to this website at your own risk. But I'm using this website because they scour the entire internet and they get everyone's draft projections and they kind of average it out. So I like that model a lot better than the others. It gives us a good look at what everyone's thinking. And, whenever I took a quick glance at this, I said, well, this is about where everyone is projected to go so far. So obviously up here at number 1, we've got Jalen Wright, who was projected to be a 3rd-round draft pick. We'll kick it off with him. And we can see that he measured in at 5'10 and a half, 210 pounds at the NFL Combine. The average size for an NFL running back is 5'10 and a half, 213 pounds. So he came in just a shade lighter than maybe what he would have wanted to, but I think that he performed really well. And we can see right here that his prospect grade is a 6.33. That is actually 2nd amongst all running backs that participated in the combine. And down here, we can see some more of his grades. His production score is at a 68. That's going to be really important. I don't know how or why it's only at a 68 because he averages 7.4 yards a carry last season in the SEC. So that number should actually be a lot higher. I just don't know how they're quantifying that. But his athleticism score is at a 93, which is really, really high. And that's going to be great for him. And his total score is 79 as a prospect, according to NFL.com. Now, up under here, you can see that he did actually test in the 40. He ran a 4.38, and his 10-yard split was a 1.55. All those numbers are going to be very important. His vertical jump was 38 inches, and then his broad jump was 11.2, which I believe was the best out of all of the running backs. And I'll just kind of scroll down here, try to skip over all of this stuff right here so that we don't get demonetized. But y'all can just take a quick look at what everyone is saying. You could pause it where necessary. And this is Jalen Wright's profile on ESPN.com. We can see what his stats was from last season. Over 1,000 yards in the SEC with 4 touchdowns, 7.4 yards per carry, like we talked about. And then just as we're looking through the rest of his stats, you can see that, he was very productive throughout his entire career. Now, one of the things that maybe could have ended up, hurting his overall production grade on NFL.com was his lack of carries. But at the same time, I think that that's going to help him out tremendously. So that's going to be the biggest thing as we're talking about all these prospects is how did they look on the field? What's their film look like? How productive were they? What's the, strength of competition? That's going to be a big part of it. But also, do you meet the prototype size and, speed, things like that? NFL teams covered all of those different metrics very, very high. And I think that Jalen Wright is a guy that looks the part, right, from top to bottom. He's pretty much prototype size, and he's got a faster than average 40 time. The average 40 time for NFL running backs is a 4.49. He ran a 4.38. So he should be good as far as being one of the top running backs picked in this year's draft. Now, how high he goes, we don't know. You have to understand that running backs are not very highly coveted in the NFL. They're pretty much a dime a dozen, but I do feel like he could potentially work himself up into that second round if he has a good showing coming up here tomorrow in his pro day. Now, will he run his 40? I don't know. I think he's probably just going to kind of go through some regular, like running back drills, things like that, just to kind of showcase how he looks, especially catching that football out of the backfield and just to kind of show that he's able to change directions and cut and, read the holes correctly, things like that. Everything that everyone is going to be doing coming up in our pro day is going to be something that they're very comfortable doing and they've practiced it over and over and over again. So we are expecting a big showing, but at the same time, he may run that 40 again because he is a track guy. And P and I were saying, hey, he's a low 4.3 guy, maybe even a 4.2 guy. So if he could somehow run that 40 again and break into the 4.2 range, then yeah, I think that he would more than likely be the number one running back pick in this year's draft. And a lot of people, there's a lot of analysts that come out and say, well, this, these times and these metrics and stuff, it's really just to prove what we can see from you on film. But that's not necessarily true. And we're starting to see more and more players are opting out of participating in the NFL Combine and testing as far as the numbers go, or even participating in their pro day. Like if you are projected to be a first round pick, you're usually not doing this stuff. And there was some speculation on ESPN as to is this the way that NFL football is going to change moving forward? Are the players going to have more say so? I think that it's starting to lean more that way, especially with how college football is set up now. The players just have it inside of their minds that, hey, we really do carry all of the power. We carry most of the weight. Even though the NFL owners are billionaires, they need a good product for people to watch. So I think that, this entire pro day thing is going to be a lot more for the players that are trying to prove themselves versus, the first round types of talents. But yeah, I think that Jalen Wright could maybe he might end up running his 40. And if he can do better than a 4.38, then it's going to be worth it. But if not, then he definitely does not want to do it. So it's all going to come down to how has he been timing leading up to tomorrow's pro day. And the next player on the list is Mr. Joe Milton. He is projected to be a fifth round pick. And we can see that Joe Milton comes in at 6'5", 235 pounds. He's got big hands, he's got long arms, all that good stuff. And the average size for an NFL quarterback is about 6'2", 219 pounds. So he passes that first test with flying colors, and you can see that his prospect grade is at a 5.8. Now down here on his production score is at a 67. So this right here is weird because what Jalen Wright was at a 68 or at a 69, and Joe Milton's at a 67. So those numbers to me are definitely skewed, but his athleticism score is at an 89. And part of that is because if you come down here to his testing numbers, he didn't really do a whole lot of testing. Now, he did his vertical and he did his broad, and both of those are really good numbers, especially for a quarterback. So you can tell that he's a really good athlete. We all know he's got a strong arm, and his total score was at a 75. And we're going to just scroll down, okay, so that you can kind of see. Let me get rid of this real quick before they try to get me for it, but you can just kind of see what the analysts on NFL.com are saying about him. Again, you can pause whenever you need to. And we can see that Joe Milton has some pretty decent numbers. Okay, 20 touchdowns to 5 interceptions isn't bad. His QBR wasn't that great, 70.4, but it's also not horrible. He threw for about 2,800 yards this past season, and he's primarily been a backup throughout his entire tenure as a quarterback from Michigan to Tennessee. So as far as production goes, he's not going to have the best numbers, but for Joe Milton, what teams are going to covet is his upside. Okay, he's got the strongest arm maybe that the NFL has ever seen, and he's mobile. He can run well. So Joe Milton was a quarterback that was, not the most productive, but he did kind of show some flashes of being capable of making some big time plays. We saw versus Alabama, he scrambled out to his right some and was able to make some very accurate passes. I don't think that he played horrible in that game. Really, that was a game that I feel like the rest of the team let us down, especially the coaching staff in that second half. So, he's played pretty well. We've seen some big, highlight moments where he's kind of trucking people and things like that. He's a big body quarterback. It's going to be very important for him to come out and test well at the pro day. Now, will he test? I don't know, but I think that he should because the average 40 time for an NFL quarterback is a 4.81. And I think that Joe Milton could break 4.6. I think that he could be like a higher 4 or 5 guy. If he does that, then all of a sudden he's going to skyrocket up teams' draft boards. And he's going to go from being like a fifth round pick to, potentially a third, maybe even a fourth round guy because he's got the strongest arm. Okay. And teams are going to fall in love with that. They're going to look at him and say, hey, there's some things in his game that I can fix. He could end up being that diamond in the rough. A couple of teams that I know love to pick players like that, would be the Dallas Cowboys. They love projects. And, I would not be surprised to see one of these teams has got a veteran quarterback that maybe is, kind of on his way out of the league, maybe in the next 2 to 3 years, that they say, hey, we're going to bring in Joe Milton and we're going to just train him and get him better at some of the smaller finite details of being a quarterback and see if he can develop into a guy. Because being able to pick a quarterback, especially one that's going to lead your team in the third to fifth rounds, that's a big time steal. And someone's going to take that chance on Joe Milton if he can come out and have a really good showing at his pro day coming up tomorrow. Now, I think that he looked good throwing the football at the NFL Combine, but he's going to have to continue to replicate that, especially on intermediate passes. Continue to show them that you have that touch, you have that timing, and that you can read defenses. That's going to be huge. But he will be more than likely throwing to some guys that he threw with last season. Okay, there's several players that I feel like will be participating, in this year's pro day that actually aren't even on this list. Okay, and just a couple of them would be Ramel Keaton. Okay, he's probably going to come up to the pro day and especially be catching some balls from Joe Milton. Hopefully, he doesn't drop him because that's going to hurt his draft stock. He's not on the list of players that we have, from this website, but he will be participating for sure. And then the other one is not going to be playing offense, but Gabe Judy Lally, okay, he's going to be participating in this as well. And I think that he has a chance to get picked up somewhere as an undrafted free agent. I just want to kind of sneak that in here really quickly. But all in all, I think that Joe Milton really has to come out, test well, and again, show that he can throw with that touch. We all know that he's got that cannon forearm, and you can showcase that too. You always want to kind of highlight your strengths and remind these NFL scouts, coaches, and GMs that, hey, I do have this cannon. So he will showcase that some. And but I think that the biggest thing is going to be showing that touch and the timing and anticipation. And the next player is going to be Kamal Haddon, who's projected to be a seventh round pick. So Kamal comes in at 6'1", 196 pounds. The NFL average for a cornerback is 6 feet tall, 193 pounds. So he passes that test. His prospect grade is a 6.2, which is like 15th or 16th best overall on this website. And you can see that his production score is only at a 71. I think that it could have been a lot higher, especially with the way that he played in the 2023 season. His athleticism score is at a 72. Part of that is because he didn't test at the NFL Combine, and his total score is at a 73. I think that he can definitely get these numbers up. And just like I did with the other players, we'll scroll through so that y'all can kind of pause and see what the analysts are saying about Mr. Haddon. And you can see that Haddon had 6 interceptions throughout his tenure at Tennessee, which is big, especially playing in the SEC. And his stats, right? Like his numbers don't look great from this past season, but again, he missed a lot of the season with a shoulder injury, I believe, that he sustained in that Alabama game, but he came back out and he continued to fight. So you have to love the grittiness of a young cornerback like this. And us as Vol fans know all too well how big of a piece Kamal Haddon was for our team this past season. Once he went down, the production also went down. And I'm not just talking about from the secondary, but also, from the pass rush. I think that the defense as a whole took a big step back without having him out there. And that just goes to show how important it is to have a cornerback of his caliber. And I do feel like NFL scouts, coaches, and GMs will be taking note of that. So him being a 7th round pick to me, I mean, I don't see that happening. It's properly projected at that right now just because he didn't time or test at the NFL Combine. So his testing is going to be really big at his pro day. And a 4.48 is the NFL average for a cornerback. I think that Kamal Haddon can run in those low 4.4s. If he can get to a 4.3, all of a sudden we're talking about a guy that has gone from a potential 7th round pick to, I would say, 3rd round. Because again, you have to look at his body of work, look at his size, and then look at how athletic he is. And you have to say, well, this is a guy that we could end up getting as a steal. Now, again, something that matters a lot whenever these players are getting drafted is what type of a draft buzz do they have? Because these GMs, these owners, they want to get the most bang for their buck. So if they can get a steal, if there's a guy that has, we'll say with Haddon, he's got a seventh round grade currently, maybe that moves up to fifth, maybe even fourth round. They may say, well, we're going to try to wait as long as we possibly can before we pick them because that saves us money and we can go out and get someone else to kind of fit our needs. But I think that Haddon's going to look really good in his drills and all that. We saw that from last spring. I think that Coach Martinez does a really good job of getting our secondary pieces ready as far as just going through those drills. They always look really crisp, really clean doing it. So I would expect for Kamal Haddon to be very impressive coming out here tomorrow. And the next player is going to be Callie Castles, tight end. He's projected to be an undrafted free agent. And number one thing for Callie is going to be his size. He comes in at 6'5", 252 pounds. The NFL average for a tight end is 6'4" and a half, 248 pounds. So he passes that threshold for sure. And then you can see that his stats are pretty consistent throughout his entire career. He had 5 touchdowns and a 12.9 yards per catch average last season with our Volunteers in the SEC. I think that he looked really good. So as far as his production goes, he should get a slight bump. Okay. It wasn't outrageous, but I mean, as far as, just him being a tight end, I think that those are some pretty solid numbers. And I'm definitely expecting for McAllen Castles to come out and test tomorrow at the Pro Day because I think that he can look really good there, right? So the average 40 time for an NFL tight end is a 4.7. I think that he can definitely break that, especially if he gets down to about 245, maybe even up to, like 240. That would be huge because that's still a good size for an NFL tight end, especially if you can run sub 4.7, maybe even low 4.6. If he can somehow break 4.5, he's going to move himself all the way up, I would say, to like the third round. He's going to turn a whole lot of heads, and teams are going to covet him very, very highly. Just his skill set is great. He looked great, blocking last season. He looks really good in his routes, and he was used as a gadget piece for us. He played a little bit of fullback in that Citrus Bowl, so he's kind of a versatile do-it-all guy. I would love to see him maybe go on to the 49ers, a team that likes to use their tight ends in different ways. I feel like he could fit into that system very, very well. But keep a close eye out for Callie Castles. I think that undrafted free agent thing is going to end up changing after his pro day. Next player coming in at 409 is Jabari Small. He's also projected to be an undrafted free agent. And as we're looking at his size, he's listed at 5'11", 213 pounds, but he came in a few ticks under that at the Shrine Bowl. I think he was around 5'8.5" and somewhere around 210 pounds. That's not a huge deal, okay, for running backs by any means. But we're looking at his stats, and he had 2 touchdowns and he averaged 5 yards per carry. I think that that's really good in the SEC. And as you just kind of scroll down, you can see that he did a good job of receiving as well. He had 2 touchdowns in 2022. I just think that he's going to look relatively productive, especially whenever you consider that he was sharing time with 2 other running backs throughout his tenure pretty much here at Tennessee. So I definitely think that Jabari Small will also be testing. Probably everyone else that we're going to be talking about on this list is going to have to test because if you want to get drafted, you've got to show it. Like you've got to go out there, and you've got to take that risk. And hopefully Jabari Small can run up under that 4.48, which is the average. I do think that he will. He's another guy. I mean, low 4.4s, maybe higher 4.3s. If he gets to that range, then he could end up maybe getting drafted. Again, with running backs, it's just so tough because it's so many of them. And for someone that doesn't have a whole lot of draft buzz going on for him, it's going to be tough for him to get drafted, playing at that position. But I'm definitely rooting for him. I think he's going to look good going through all of his drills, his footwork and all that stuff's going to look really, really nice, really, really clean and crisp. So we are definitely rooting for Mr. Jabari Small. And our next player coming in at number 420 is Jalen Tank McCullough. He was one of our safeties from last season. He's projected to be an undrafted free agent. And he comes in at 6 feet tall, 206 pounds. We're hoping that that's what he will actually measure in at because the safety average in the NFL is 6'1.5", 203 pounds. So if he comes in at that size, he's going to be good to go. Now, he played a whole lot of football for our Volunteers. I think that he broke a record for the most starts in all of Tennessee football history. So that's big. I think that that is going to look good to a lot of the NFL scouts, coaches, and GMs. Now, whenever you look at his production out there on the field, I think that it was pretty solid, right? You're looking at his tackles. It's not terrible. Okay. It's not absolutely incredible. His best season really was this past season where he had 3 interceptions. He also had 3 interceptions back in 2021, but I just feel like he played a lot better this season. It just seems like he kind of put it all together, and that's really what you would want to see in a send-off year heading into the NFL draft. So Tank is going to have to run up under a 4.53, which is the NFL average for a free safety. Even though he might be playing strong, you want to get the best times that you possibly can. I think that he can do it. I think that he could be a higher 4.4 guy. If he gets into that mid to low 4.4 range, then watch out for him to be a very draftable football player. He's also going to do a great job, on the whiteboard and just breaking down the X's and O's, things like that. And that's going to be important, I would say, for every single player. I haven't mentioned that up until this point, but it is critical. And also just the way that he interviews, just like any other job interview, the way that, whoever is interviewing you, how do you fit into the culture, of their company, right? Which is essentially what the NFL is. Each team is a company and the owner is essentially the CEO. So, how do they do there is going to be big. And I think that Tank is going to blow all of that out of the water. So if he can test well, if he looks smooth in his on the field drills and all that type of stuff, then I think that he can end up getting drafted probably somewhere in those later rounds, like on the final day, something like that. But we'll see. Okay. There's no telling. Again, he doesn't have a whole lot of draft buzz, but safeties are very highly coveted in the NFL. You can have a good team or a good defense without having some good players in the middle of that field, especially at safety these days. So definitely rooting for Tank McCullough. Next up at number 450 is Aaron Beasley. He was one of our linebackers from last season, also projected to be an undrafted free agent. Now, Aaron Beasley is listed at 6'1, 225 pounds. I don't know if he's quite that tall. He might be about that heavy, but the average size for an NFL linebacker is 6'2 and a quarter and 240 pounds. So he's going to be undersized either way that you want to slice it. But he had some really good seasons with Tennessee. I think in 21, he was our best linebacker, really 21 and 22. He was probably our best linebacker in 23 as well because Keenan Pili went down. And you maybe could even make an argument that some of the true freshmen outperformed Aaron Beasley. So he kind of started to trend backwards, as he got a little bit older, and that's not going to be good for him. So the testing is going to be huge for Aaron Beasley. The average 40 time for an NFL linebacker is a 4.6. With him being so undersized, he would really have to be, I would say, 4.45 and probably under, or somewhere around, in that ballpark. Sub 4.5 for absolute sure. I mean, if he doesn't get there, then I don't see any realistic way that he gets drafted. And I hate to say that because I love Aaron Beasley. I think that he gave his all for Tennessee, but he's primarily going to end up being a special teams player if he does get picked up after the draft, right? He's probably going to be an undrafted free agent. And I think that if he does sign with the team, then he can really make his mark because he is a good football player. He just, he didn't have the best opportunities to make plays last season because he didn't have enough help around him at the linebacker position. So that didn't help him by any means. But definitely rooting for him, rooting for all these guys. And we'll see what he does out there on the field coming up here tomorrow. But I would most definitely say that he's going to be a guy that we're looking for. Hey, man, he needs to be up under a 4.5 for him to have a realistic shot. And our next player, 498, is Charles Campbell. He was our kicker last season. He's projected to be an undrafted free agent as well. And I think that's what he'll end up at. Kickers usually don't get drafted. And we don't know if he will be participating in our pro day tomorrow. But if he does, I would anticipate that he's going to want to kick as many 55 plus yard field goals as possible from different spots. If he does that, then someone will most definitely pick him up. And our last player is going to be Jacob Warren at 554, projected to be an undrafted free agent. So looking at Jacob Warren's size, listed at 6'6", 253 pounds, I think he's actually closer to about 6'7", which is huge. Like you want to have those big tight ends with a wide catch radius. And again, the average size for a NFL tight end is 6'4" and a half, 248 pounds. So Jacob Warren most definitely exceeds that. Now, as far as production goes, there isn't a whole lot to speak of. I think that he played well. He was another player that we asked to do a lot. He's a very intelligent young man. He's going to be one that interviews well, and I think that that's going to help him out tremendously. But the biggest thing for Mr. Warren is going to be how he tests out there on the field and really how he looks just catching the football, all that type of stuff. His arms really long with him being so tall. You're going to want for his arms to be very long as well. That will look really good to these NFL scouts, coaches, and GMs. But can he run up under that 4.7? I think it's going to be very, very tough for him. He just does not strike me as a player that can break that, but I'm hoping that he will. If he gets to like a 4.6, something like that, then yeah, I think that he has a good chance of getting picked up. Maybe not in the draft, but I do think that someone would sign him on, maybe as like a practice squad player. And if he just continues to grind, then he can continue to kind of work up that ladder. You never know what's going to happen. Football, people get hurt all the time. That's not what we want to see happen, but it's just part of the game. So that would bring him some opportunities. But I do want to get to our final two players that I believe will be participating in our pro day tomorrow. Starting off with Ramel Keaton, 6'3", 197 pounds. The NFL average size for a wide receiver is 6'1.5", 200 pounds. So he looks good from that perspective. And you look at his stats, okay, his numbers aren't absolutely phenomenal, but they weren't that bad this past season, even though I don't think that that was his best season, really 22. I think that he played a lot better. He had some drop this year, and back in 2022, he had some very critical catches. So it's going to be very important for him to come out at the pro day and show, hey, I can catch the ball. I've got some really good hands, especially coming from Joe Milton. If he can catch some of those bullets, then I feel like NFL scouts will like him a lot. Now, the NFL average 40 time for a wide receiver is a 4.48. I feel like Keaton can beat that. Maybe not by much. I think he's maybe like a 4.41 type of a guy, maybe a little bit faster. If he could break 4.3, that would be huge. And I think that he could end up getting drafted. But more than likely, he's going to be a guy that's going to have to prove himself as an undrafted free agent. We'll keep a close eye out on it, but let's move on to the next player, which is Gabe Jeudy-Lally, who's listed at 6'2", 190 pounds. I think that he will actually measure in somewhere around that. And you can see, obviously, he played at Vanderbilt, he played at BYU, and he played for our Volunteers last season. His production looks pretty solid. Okay, it's not absolutely incredible, but he definitely is a headsy player. And that's going to be absolutely huge for Mr. Gabe Jeudy-Lally because he's not necessarily a prototype cornerback in the sense of I don't see him being very good in man-to-man coverage. He's more of a squat corner, so he would have to go to the right system where they like to play a whole lot of zone. And in that case, then yeah, you would probably love a young player like this because he understands football. Okay, on that whiteboard, he's going to do a great job. He's going to interview well, and he's going to have to run, I would say, sub 4.45. If he can break that, then he has a chance. He has a chance in one of those later rounds to get drafted. I just think that cornerback is a position that is so highly coveted and teams need it. Every single team is going to need a cornerback, especially if you can get them in the later rounds. So his testing on the field drills, all that stuff is going to be really, really big. But I think that his interview process may mean even more for him because he has to go to the right system. And I think that a organization is going to have to fall in love with Gabe Jeudy-Lally. But that's it for this video. I hope that y'all enjoyed it. Hopefully it's a good little primer just to get y'all ready for our pro day coming up here tomorrow. And we'll have a lot more news and notes coming out over the next few days because there is so much going on. But we appreciate y'all, as always, for tuning into this channel, for sticking all the way to the end. Please make sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, share with your friends, family, and other volunteer fans. And we'll see y'all in the next one. Thanks. Peace.